I'm Jen Edwards with the English Marketing Team, and I'm glad you could join us today. I hope that you find the ideas being presented by our speaker valuable for your classroom teaching. For those of you who are new to the webinar format, I have a few quick things to point out before the session begins. If you are calling by phone, please know that this is not a toll-free number. For that reason, we recommend that you select Use Mic and Speakers in the control bar so you can listen toll-free through your computer speakers. You may also notice that your line has been muted. This is to minimize background noise or any interruptions to the presentation. We encourage you to ask questions by typing the text in the box marked Questions on the right-hand side of your screen in the webinar dashboard. If your dashboard seems to have disappeared, hit the orange arrow and it will open back up. You can send us your questions at any point, and when the formal presentation is over, we'll be using the remaining time to pose as many of your questions as possible to our speaker. Any questions we don't get to will be forwarded along with your email address to the speaker directly, so all questions will be answered one way or another. Please include your name and school at the beginning of your question. We would also like to invite you to keep up with this conversation on Twitter, and to do that you can follow us at PearsonNorthAM using hashtag PearsonLearn. Okay, so this morning's session is titled True Integration, Navigating Reading and Writing Through Academic Content, and it is being presented by Jilani Warsi. Dr. Warsi earned his MA in English at Patna University with an emphasis on descriptive linguistics, historical linguistics, and language teaching. He received an MA in applied linguistics from California State University in Northridge. Dr. Warsi joined the doctoral program in applied linguistics at Boston University in 1994 and successfully defended his Ph.D. dissertation in May of '01. Dr. Warsi has taught in all of these locations, as well as at Salem State, Fisher, and Newbury Colleges, in the Framingham State College's Overseas Program, in the Institute for English Language Programs at Harvard University, and most recently he joined the Department of Academic Literacy at Queensborough Community College in 2004. Dr. Warsi has co-authored Read to Succeed and Read to Achieve with Professor David Rothman. He is currently writing Read, Think, Write, a true integration with David as well. Dr. Warsi's areas of interest are second language acquisition, interlanguage, fossilization, phonology, morphology, and linguistic theory. All right, Jilani, it's time to turn it over to you. Are you ready to get started?
I am. But I don't see that. Okay, it just popped up. All right, show my screen. Okay. Are you able to see my screen now?
We are.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Jennifer and Steve for putting this webinar together. My name is Jilani Warsi, and it's an honor to be speaking to my colleagues today. I represent myself and my co-author, David Rothman, with whom I'm writing an integrated skills book entitled Read, Think, Write. He sends his greetings, and as we speak, he's in the classroom teaching, so he couldn't join me today for the webinar. The presentation is titled True Integration, Seeing Reading and Writing in Two Mirrors Through a Content-Based Approach. The reason we call it True Integration is there is this curriculum redesign that's taking over across the nation. Most educators, policymakers, and administrators are thinking about integrating reading and writing. So our approach to teaching reading and writing as integrated skills is very organic. And before I get into the details of this webinar, I just want to walk you through our presentation. First, I'll talk about reading as a skill, and then I will discuss thinking as an integral part of reading and connecting to writing. After that, I will talk about some academic disciplines with a focus on content areas. And finally, the last part of my lecture today will compare and contrast the traditional way of teaching reading and writing and our approach to teaching reading and writing as integrated skills. So first and foremost, students who are developmental readers, they're vulnerable, they're weak, they don't read very often. We suggest that we offer them a variety of reading genres. These genres could be articles, they could be articles from leading newspapers, blogs, they could be fiction or a memoir. We also suggest focusing on academic disciplines because the purpose of remediation or teaching developmental reading is to prepare them for the rigorous requirements of academia. These students, when they finally exit from remediation, will be taking credit-bearing courses, and they will need to acquire the vocabulary that is specific to a discipline. Discipline-specific vocabulary is very important, because then they can contextualize meaning when they read the 100-level college textbooks. Along with that, it's also important that we do not throw the baby out with bathwater. We want these students to learn college reading skills such as determining meaning from context, identifying main ideas and supporting details, and also acquire some study skills such as making annotations, highlighting the text, revisiting a reading for to repair any damage to comprehension, ask comprehension questions. They should also be able to interpret graphs and do graphic analysis, and all those things. They're very important that these students get introduced to these skills at a very early stage, so when they move on to credit-bearing courses, they'll be able to apply those skills. So that is our concept of teaching reading. Rather than having disjointed reading that have nothing to do with one another in a chapter, they should all be based on a theme. So the approach is very thematic, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit more later. Let me now move on to thinking. So after students have read a variety of reading selections from different genres, rather than simply asking them comprehension questions, which is important to understand if they are understanding the text or not, we encourage asking open-ended critical thinking discussion questions. You can have a breakout sessions whereby students get into groups of 3 or 4, and then they answer these questions first orally, take notes, and perhaps you can ask them to write a reflection or write a response to what they have read before. Some other skills as they're thinking at reading and thinking about the reading is they can outline key ideas. And this is an important point because for reading comprehension to do summative assessment, we can ask our students to write a summary of a reading prompt. And if they can identify the main idea and locate the supporting details, both major and minor details, they can prepare an outline of the author's key ideas, then they're able to write a very brief summary, including all of those main important points. As they read, we encourage our students to make annotations, and in the margin, formulate questions about the reading. These questions could be about comprehension, or these questions could be extended questions that take the students beyond the text, and maybe some of them rely on their background knowledge. We also do activities such as debates in the classroom on a controversial topic. And when I come to discuss the academic disciplines, I'll talk about what those controversial topics are. So debates, for example, is one of the ways to get them engaged, take a position on a controversial issue, and then challenge and defend a position. We also have panel discussions, which is low stakes. Debates are usually high stakes because one team wins, the other team loses. There's a pro team, there's a con team. Panel discussions are very low stakes because there is no winner or loser. It's just an open forum where you can choose a controversial topic, and the students could be one of the students could be a moderator, and then other panelists, they just discuss and express their thoughts and ideas, just articulate them. So that is also a very important activity right after reading something about a controversial topic. Our readers have trouble considering authors' bias. They're so vulnerable and even naive to a point that they just take everything, accept everything at their face value. And they very seldom take into the consideration that the author himself or herself may be biased. So the ability to see the author's bias and then determine the author's tone and purpose and making an educated guess there that, okay, I see where the bias is. So we recommend the Talmudic approach to studying, and always questioning the basic premise of contentious claims and never accept things at their face value. So you can see how in this way we're integrating reading and writing, and it's a 3-step process And I must say at this point that these steps are not necessarily sequential. It's not that one follows another in a particular order, but rather these steps are cyclical in nature, meaning one could read and think and then go back to read, write, take notes, make annotations, and then revisit the reading and think some more as one revises the paper. And this is an important point made by my colleague, that reading, thinking, writing, they're so organically integrated that they're not necessarily sequences of events. So that was the thinking part, and then let me now move on to writing. I have spoken to you about controversial topics. It's very important that while students are taking our courses, reading and writing as integrated course, that they embark on an intellectual journey. What we do is, there are, some of you are familiar with there are many books out there. They call themselves integrated, they say we integrate reading and writing skills, but in reality, they're really a combo. They're not necessarily integrated. And what happens in these books, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, that their chapters are given a title, and the titles are college reading skills. So, for example, the first chapter is called Main Idea. The second chapter is called Supporting Details. The third chapter is called Making Inferences, and so on and so forth. What that does to the students is the students don't understand the purpose of reading disjointed articles, because the focus is on the skill so much that the content is not contextualized. So our approach is very different. And this point was actually brought home by my colleague, Professor David Rothman, and he said once, and I've been quoting him a lot, he said once to me that nobody majors in main idea. Nobody majors in supporting details. And it is so true. Professional writers, when they sit down, I don't think that in the back of their mind they're saying, I'm going to use these supporting details, or, this is going to be the purpose or tone of my writing. Writing is, it comes naturally, but it's for good readers to determine those things, such as purpose and tone. So something has to be said about dry, insipid, boring, and disjointed reading. So there is a chapter which focuses on main idea, or there's another chapter that focuses on supporting details. And there are 4 or 5 readings that have absolutely nothing to do with one another, none whatsoever. It's very confusing to the students because they don't understand the purpose of reading the different articles that have nothing to do with each other. So what David Rothman and I propose that we focus on, rather than focusing on a college reading skill, that we focus on an academic discipline. So for example, there is a whole discipline of psychology. All right, so you introduce the discipline, then you walk them through discipline-specific vocabulary. So for psychology, it could be psychoanalysis, for example. That's an important word for students to know. So that way they can internalize discipline-specific vocabulary. So after they're introduced to the discipline, then we introduce a controversial topic. So as you can see, can human behavior be changed? Now, obviously, this stirs things up because there are 2 opposing points of view. Some students can say yes, others can say no, it's genetically determined, you cannot change human behavior. But this provides for much fodder for thought, and students can use that as a springboard and then do more research, use the library databases, find pertinent articles that are related to these topics, and then participate in a debate or a panel discussion. Some other disciplines that are very hot, very popular among the students are criminal justice, environmental science, business, sociology. So we came up with these academic discipline-oriented controversial topics for the students. They certainly pique the students' interest in reading, and they get excited about reading and writing, of course. And there's this thinking process that is fundamental to the learning outcomes. So these are the topics for different, I have only given you 5. There are other disciplines such as health and nutrition or social science, nursing, political science, for example. And it's for the students to brainstorm and come up with controversial topics that they can brainstorm together. All right, so now that I have spoken about reading, thinking as an outcome of reading, as students engage themselves with the reading selection, and the thing to talk about these controversial topics, let's now move on to the process of writing, which has been a bane of most instructors who try to teach writing to developmental writers. It's very difficult. I do not need to tell you how hard it is to get them to understand what the main idea is, how to write a circumscribed thesis statement, and then expound on it in the body paragraphs starting with the topic sentence, all that juicy stuff that we like our students to learn. So in terms of responding to text of the students, conjure up this image in your mind's eye. So the students have read, let's say, psychology. Can human behavior be changed? They have read, they have analyzed the text, they have dissected it, they have talked about it, discussed it, taken a position, they have participated in debates. So they have a lot of notes and then other articles that are related to this controversial topic. So now we ask them to respond to, okay, you have done all of these activities, you have acquired some knowledge about the topic, let's try to write about it. It could be a 5-paragraph academic essay, or you could be a reflection paper. You can ask them to just write a response essay. To get there, you can start with free writing for 5 minutes or 10 minutes where students write continuously without having to worry about the mechanical aspects of writing, such as grammar errors and spelling errors and all of that. We also use blogs where students not only write through blogging, but they also respond to their classmates' blogs. So that also becomes very interactive because they can take this newly acquired knowledge and then write about it, and then also become editors in a sense, or more like reviewers in the sense that they are now reading their classmates' responses to the same issue and responding to it. I had mentioned earlier that when we teach reading, we ask the students to prepare an outline of the reading, and that outline must consist of the main idea and some of the major details that support the main idea. So a natural consequence of that activity is summary writing. And summary writing is difficult because students often do not realize that they're not allowed to express their opinion in a summary. So more often than not, they end up saying, I enjoyed this reading, or when they do not really understand the assignment. The nature of the assignment is to simply paraphrase the main idea and supporting details, mainly major details. So after they write a summary, now here comes the response part. You can give them a formal essay writing assignment in which they write an essay with a thesis statement that they have talked about, they have taken a position on whether or not human behavior can be changed, and then they can write a full 5-paragraph essay with an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph. Some other things when they're writing you can do while you're teaching them reading skills is they can incorporate appropriate patterns of organization. If it's an argumentative paper that they're writing, then they can certainly use the cause and effect pattern of organization. It could be the chronological pattern of organization. It really depends, comparing and contrasting. While they're at this task, writing a paper, we also like them to substantiate their claims with evidence, because very often students will make a claim and they will forget that they need to provide more evidence to the reader in order to be convincing. Otherwise, readers will not have any respect for the writers. Coherence and cohesion in body paragraph, they're very important, using transitional words. And finally, after they write, we tell them that it's very important to master the art of revising and editing, because it's just a preliminary draft, and even professional writers revise their draft several times. First you revise, and revision is all about clarifying things, making your ideas very clear and say it in a precise manner. And then editing is the second step, where you look for mechanical things. If you're missing a comma here and there, spelling errors, you fix all of that. So I think we have come full circle with reading, thinking, and writing. This is how we envision reading and writing as integrated skills. As I said before, it has to be very holistic and organic process. And unfortunately, I've seen this happening a lot in reading courses or writing courses that are separate, or even the courses that are integrated, that we really do not truly integrate these two skills, including the process of thinking throughout. So reading, thinking, and then writing. Going back to reading, we often make this point very clear to our students that just because you have written a preliminary draft, it doesn't mean that you're done, because there is still a lot more to do. You can go back, or ask a classmate to review your preliminary draft, and then make some changes. And you may even have to go back to the original source to maybe comprehend things better. Or if you want to integrate parts of the text into your essay, you need to maybe revisit the essay and see if you have quoted the author properly. All of those things, they're part of revising and editing. Okay, so now in the remainder of my presentation today, I will talk about the reading process and the writing process. And the final slide, as I said before in my prefatory remark today, I will compare the traditional approach to reading and writing and our approach, which is truly integrated. When students enter a reading, there's a handout. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you the handout today. But when students enter a reading, we give them a handout and we ask them to make predictions. But no matter how poor they are or how vulnerable they are as readers, they do have some knowledge, some prior knowledge, some based on their life experiences. So before they enter a reading, we ask them to make predictions about what is this, what do you think the author will talk about, we'll discuss based on the title. Just read the title. And then as they're reading, so there is threefold: before, while they're reading, and after the read. So as they're reading, we want them to be very active readers. We ask them to highlight and annotate the text, write questions in the margin, any questions that they are not sure about, questions for clarification, questions for comprehension. So they do that. We call this active reading. So rather than seeing reading as a very passive activity, we want students to be active learners as they read. The focus of this reading activity and how motivated they are about the topic, all of that is taken into consideration. And after the reading part is, once they have read, we give them a set of questions to make sure that if there was any damage, if there were gaps in their reading comprehension, that they can go back and repair miscomprehension. So that is how we see the reading process: as they read, after the read, well, actually before the read, as they read, and after the read a text. So let's now look at the writing process. And I said earlier in our title that there are mirror images. So how are they mirror images? Just like this, the reading process, we see it as threefold: before the read, making predictions, and as the read, making annotations, and after the read, going back and revisiting the text and making any repair to their reading comprehension. The writing process is also threefold. And that is why we call them, these two, as juxtaposed mirror images. So there's pre-writing. Before they get to the essay writing part, there's a lot of note-taking and outlining, and perhaps even free writing and summary writing too. Summaries are actually very good. Mostly reading instructors see summary as a writing activity, but I must say that summary writing is actually a great indicator of their reading comprehension. Clearly, if students read something and they do not understand, their summary is going to be completely off base. But if they have no trouble determining the main idea of the author and locating the supporting details, and they understand, then they will have no trouble writing a summary. The summary writing, not only just summative assessment, but also an assessment of their reading comprehension, is how we, David Rothman and I, view this. So pre-writing includes taking notes, making an outline, or perhaps even writing a short summary of the article. Then you get to the first draft part, where they take it from paragraph to essays. So while they're outlining, while they're making notes, they may even brainstorm ideas and come up with an outline of their essay with a thesis statement and what these, how and what important points, key important points will elaborate on the thesis statement to prove and support it. So pre-writing, writing the draft, and then the third part of it is after writing. So they can either peer review each other's papers and then respond to constructive feedback. We always encourage them to swallow their pride and take the reviewers' constructive feedback, with a grain of salt. So based on the feedback, we also tell them that they don't have to incorporate 100% of the reviewers' suggestions. They can pick and choose what is really important and then revise and edit. So as you can see, the reason we're calling them two mirror images is that there are more or less same processes. There's something that precedes the reading process, just like something that precedes the writing process. And then there's the process itself whereby students really get engaged, reading, breaking things down, and figuring out things, analyzing the reading, just as the writing process. And then there's a sequence after that, post-reading or post-writing, you may want to call it. Okay, so the reading and writing, these two processes we see integrated. And this brings me to my last slide now. And we say the traditional approach, as I said before, there are chapters that are named a college reading skill. So, for example, a typical integrated textbook may have the first chapter is on vocabulary and context, and it's heavily focused on just vocabulary. Yes, in context, maybe with context clues and some readings, but the readings are not thematically organized and they have nothing to do with each other. That's the traditional approach. Our approach is content-based. So it's the content itself that becomes the driving force and enables the student to really dive into the text, get deep down into the text, and make sense of the content. All of the exercises are based on that content. So if it's psychology, it's discipline-specific vocabulary. All of the readings are about the human mind. It could be human behavior. It could be how the mind thinks. All of those things. So as you can see, the two different approaches, true integration is content-based. The traditional way of doing things are always a skill-based approach, skill-based. I've said this already, disjointed chapter readings, targeting college reading skills. Our approach is, rather than focusing on college reading skills, we suggest that we focus on academic disciplines. At a very rudimentary level, of course, we are not psychologists and sociologists. So it's an introduction to these academic disciplines for the students. And as I said before, students, they have their majors, they're thinking about pursuing a career. Some of them want to become a nurse or an educator or a chemist, a biologist. So these chapters actually really help them figure out what they really want to do with their careers. They're all academic disciplines: biology, psychology, sociology, political science. Look, you can see the difference. Rather than focusing on college reading skills, the focus is on content. And while they are analyzing the content, breaking things down, reading it, always asking them higher order thinking questions, activities to reflect on the reading selections themselves. And my last point here in terms of integration, and I have one more final point to make actually before this. In most cases, writing, whatever they're writing, they're not fully integrated with chapter readings. For example, instructors may give them a writing assignment, may give them topics, and then ask them to do some preliminary research, go to the library databases and read some articles and then do it. But if the focus is on academic discipline, if your focus is on psychology and you are talking about how the mind works, students are already engaged. Everybody's engaged, and they're thinking about this. They read more that focuses on this article, theme, psychology, this particular topic. For example, can human behavior be changed? They write response writing assignments that are completely integrated with discipline-specific readings. And you will see a remarkable improvement in their writing after they have gone through the complex process of reading and thinking about it and discussing. You can see a nice integration of not just reading and writing, but the 4 major linguistic skills, such as reading, writing, listening, and speaking. They all come together full circle as they incorporate all of these skills. Last but not least, David Rothman and I, we have spoken about this issue for the longest time. I think reading and writing is all a matter of semantics and terminology. In reading, we ask them to determine the main idea. When they write, we ask them to write a narrow thesis statement. There is no difference. The main idea is the thesis statement. It depends on whose perspective you're taking. If you're taking the writer's perspective, then there's a thesis statement. If you're taking the reader's perspective, then there is a main idea. The same goes for supporting details. From a reading perspective, we call it, there are major details, there are minor details. From the writing perspective, we call them development, more development, give examples, give specific examples. So you can see how there are 2 mirror images because it's really a matter of terminology. You may call the main idea the thesis statement or the thesis statement the main idea. When the students when they think outside of the box, then they see the big picture. They say, okay, I'm doing what the writer has done. Clearly what you're reading is written by an author. So the author wrote it and they had a thesis statement in mind. It's for the reader to determine, okay, I see where the main idea is. And they have to go through the rest of the text and find out where the supporting details are and how they support the writer's main stance or thesis statement, if you will. So those were my final thoughts. I think that is what I had to say, and I'd be happy to take questions from you at this point. Thank you.
All right, Jilani, as we're waiting for questions to come in, I had a few for you real quick. In terms of database usage and analyzing bias in the sources that the students are using, how do you get students to see what actually is a reliable source, and how do you cover that in class? Because that's one of the things that the students really struggle with.
Is that a question or?
Yep. What do you do to help students see that?
Sure. As I said during my lecture or talk, the students are vulnerable, and they do take the author's view at their face value. They do not question. I'm a little student. This is a big author. Clearly, I have to accept everything. There's a danger in that. So what we do to answer the question is that I take my students to the library, and our librarians are great. So they give a workshop. It's a 2-hour workshop where students learn to use the library databases, and we tell them that when they write a paper, they can't just use Wikipedia, for example. I mean, the jury is still out. Some professors may allow students to use Wiki or even use quotes from Wikipedia. We don't, and we tell them that the internet is such a mess now that anybody can, write a blog, anybody can put things up, upload, and it's not, peer-reviewed. This is not like a journal article. So that library tour is what I strongly recommend. In addition to whatever you do in the classroom, wherever you teach, if you have that resource, work closely with a librarian. Our librarians do a first-rate job showing students the databases, showing students what is authentic and what is inauthentic. And students finally they learn to discern between what is authentic text and what is inauthentic text. After those 2 hours, then they browse, different sources. They go through our databases, go through refereed journals, peer-reviewed articles, and so they begin to develop a sense of what is reliable, what can be quoted, and what should not be quoted in academic work.
All right, thank you very much. We have one more question. What are the Lexile levels of some of the chapter readings?
About 12. And that's a good question to talk a little bit more about our chapter readings, Jen. There are academic words highlighted. We did it through text mining. Hart said, to give you a little historical perspective on this, it was West who compiled the academic word list, AWL, more popularly known, and it was revised by Nation in 1984, and fairly recently a linguist in New Zealand, her name is Coxhead, C-O-X-H-E-A-D, has further updated and revised the academic word list. And what it is, it contains highly frequently occurring academic words. And basically from A to Z, based on different disciplines, these words are supposed to be in the active vocabulary of most college students and college and university students in the U.S. So we emphasize that it's very important that students have internalized those words, called the academic word list, AWL. You can look it up, Google it, you will find Coxhead's website. There are lesson plans. But to answer the question, the Lexile level there is anywhere from 10 to 12.
All right, thank you, Jilani. I don't believe we have any more questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Those are my thoughts. I always believe that wisdom should be disseminated, so I keep myself very, very visible in the community. I go to conferences. I'd be happy to, answer any queries our listeners may have. You can give them my email address. I'd be happy to have this dialogue. Fred Friendly reminds us that it's our responsibility to keep the dialogue going, and I couldn't agree with him more. The only thing I add is that our collective effort, whatever we do in our disciplines, research, professional development, that the ultimate beneficiaries are our students.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jilani. I want to encourage everybody to stay on the line or use the link you launched to join us this morning for our next session at 11. Jilani's slides and the recording, as well as any handouts he might have for us, will be available on our website, Pedagogy in Practice, for your use at a later time. Thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate your attendance, and we'll include Jilani's contact information in our follow-up.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, Jilani, you know what? We just had a few more questions pop up. Do you mind?
Sure.
Is there an expectation that students will be able to read level 13 plus once they complete the course?
College readiness is a very hot topic, and as a matter of fact, we just had a panel discussion yesterday, and the major thrust was, okay, are students academically prepared for the rigorous requirements of content courses, history, biology, counting, and something has to be said about that. It is true that our students are nowhere near ready to succeed in credit-bearing courses. I mean, those who do not pass the entrance exams and their reading and writing are not up to par. So yes, there is an expectation from our department, from the administration, from our president, and from the university at large that they should be reading and producing work at that level, at least 12. 13 is even better, I would say. And the students are actually made aware from day one that they need to really improve their vocabulary and brush up on their reading and writing skills so that they can handle authentic text.
All right, very good. Again, we thank everyone for joining us, and we'll be back here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks again, Jilani.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. You're welcome.